There were 184 new insider trades filed, and we had another pretty bullish day for a start to a pretty bullish month. Looking at our dashboard here, we can see again, obviously the number of trades starting to increase overall as we come out of earnings season. We should stay above 150 total insider trades now, probably for the next 6 weeks or so until we get close to next earnings season, and we'll probably get above 200 for a little while once all of earnings are done. But again, you can see another pretty bullish day. We're well above the moving average, not quite as good as yesterday or the end of last week, but still well above that median of 33% of unscheduled insider trades that are buys. Again, remember, we're only looking at these charts, we're only looking at the unscheduled trades and trying to remove all those low signal ones so we can get the highest signal here. So a pretty bullish start again to the month of November now. After the month of October being very strong, we're now off to an even stronger start, but we're still very early, so we'll see how that goes. We also, of course, have been creeping up a little bit here in the insider sentiment. And again, the market yesterday looked pretty rocky, but with a pretty big, 1.1.5, whatever it was, 1.3% dip in the S&P. But we basically just came down and bounced right off the 20-day EMA here and have started heading slightly up in the right direction. So we'll see what happens there. Again, we haven't been below the 50-day. We haven't even gotten close really to the 50-day, except for a second there a couple weeks ago, since over the last 6 months. And so until we start really testing the 50-day, I don't think there is much to be too concerned about. Just a pretty natural pullback here to about the 20-day. If we get below there, maybe a little bit of concern, but really the concern will start when we get below the 50-day, and if we start to see this insider trading slow down and we start to see the sentiment slow down, we start to see, that rolling 3-month sentiment start to curl back the other way, then maybe we can start to get concerned. But again, for now, I think there's been quite a bit of carnage going on in some individual names. We had some biotech stuff that was struggling, a lot of stuff sort of tangential to the government, or that was getting a lot of bids due to a lot of news around the government. Things like drones and rare earths and stuff like that have maybe been struggling a little bit in some of those high momentum names, but overall everything still seems to be relatively strong. So let's go take a look now at the insider trades on CEOWatcher.com. We'll start with the purchases, of course, and we will search by transaction value, and let us go take a look. We've got Citigroup buying Wolfspeed here, but if we just take a quick look at this accession number, or at the filing here, we can see that they were doing some sort of equity swap situation where they bought a bunch of stock but then also sold it. I don't know exactly what was going on here, but it's pretty clearly not just a discretionary trade. There's something specific going on, so a pretty easy one to skip past right there. Moving on to value added communications, I think Viking Acquisition Corp. So it looks like we maybe got the wrong a company that is no longer listed, and they've now converted over to the Acquisition Corp, and then now we have the first insider trade at the Acquisition Corp going on. So a little bit of what appears to just be a bug with the site on this one, but the CEO Watcher buying the stock here, buying some of obviously the stock itself, and then warrants, a pretty common setup for these acquisition corps. Doesn't look like we have, even though we got the wrong company name here, it would still be, if there were other people buying this stock, it would still appear here under Viking, which you can see, I mean, it's really just the company name and the stock price that we're missing here. The news and stuff is all related, and this purchase is part of this $230 million public offering. Looks like it's, again, we tend to ignore public offerings, and then when it's a SPAC especially, it's a very specific type of public offering, not really the kind of thing we're looking for here. So a pretty easy lower signal sale or purchase to just skip on there. Saba Capital Management, as always, have been always buying ASA Gold and Precious Metals. We've seen a million times. Denny's Corp, we're going to just probably skip over this one just because we've got a 10% owner buying the stock. They have now bought the stock a couple of times here, which could be kind of interesting, but doesn't look like they have any track record, or maybe their one track record where they have a purchase from longer ago has gone very, very poorly for them. So 10% owners we tend to avoid, and especially if they don't have a good track record, we will avoid those. Moving on to American Tower Corp, a REIT here, which one other thing I guess that I haven't included yet in the dashboard there is, as you will know from watching these videos, REITs and banks, currently the two most bullish industries right now in terms of insider buying. Unfortunately, two of my least favorite industries, but tons and tons of insider buying going on at those two industries. So in this one, in terms of REITs, American Tower Corp is actually more interesting because it's related to telecommunications and data centers and that kind of thing. So we got a very normal buy here. As we can see, no notable remarks or notes that we need to be aware of. If we go take a look at the purchase themselves, we can see quite a bit of selling has gone on over the last 2 years with literally zero buying. And now we have the first buy by this Eugene Riley, a director, increasing their listed holdings by 4,000%. So Obviously a pretty massive purchase here. Yeah, basically they owned barely any shares, 100 and something shares, 135 shares or something like that, and then added 5,554 more. So obviously a huge increase in holdings there. $1 million purchase here after tons and tons of sales. Certainly an interesting start. And then if we go take a look now at his own history, he had, what do we have here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 sales in a row before making this purchase. So we've got somebody flipping from selling to buying. His only two purchases way back here in 2009 and 2011. Very good returns on those purchases. His sales have not been as well timed. I mean, maybe in the short term, but all of the sales, the stock has gone up after he was selling. So maybe a little bit of a downside there, you know, maybe take off a smidge of a point for him just because of that selling. But I think overall, this is still going to be a pretty high signal insider purchase because we have a couple previous purchases that went very well. We now have his first purchase in 6 years, his first purchase in over 10, well, his first trade in 6 years, his first purchase in 14 years, and he had 10 sales in a row before flipping here to a purchase. Obviously a huge size, buying a little bit of a dip here with the stock down 18% in the last 6 months. So all of that is pretty interesting here. Let's go take a look at the company itself. Unfortunately, they don't let us look at, we'd like to look at adjusted flows from operations or price over adjusted flows from operations to try to get a valuation idea here, which unfortunately they don't have that metric in here. So instead we can use kind of whatever we want. But regardless of what you're looking at, it looks like the company is probably not the most undervalued it's ever been, but it's probably on the lower end of its valuation. Maybe the only one being the price to book that doesn't quite as low, but you know, probably slightly undervalued here would be my guess, or not necessarily undervalued, but slightly under what it was trading at, the valuation that it typically trades at. Let's see if there's anything else that was interesting in here. Yeah, and they did their previous earnings. I guess we can quickly take a look at some news here just to see how the previous earnings went. But this kind of gives you a good idea of what's going on there, where they raised some full year guidance, and they beat on revenue and their adjusted funds from operations. However, they have a lawsuit with EchoStar over some unpaid tower payments that EchoStar is trying to break some contract. It makes up 2%, somewhere in here it'll tell us. It's 2% revenue exposure. So it's holding it back a little bit because 2% is not nothing. But again, even with that 2% revenue being taken away, it's still probably trading at a semi-cheap valuation. And again, it's just not a huge headwind. And there's still a decent chance, obviously, that they do have a contract signed. So there's a decent chance they'll be able to go get that money. I think the main thing here, I think overall everything looks pretty good for a high signal insider purchase here. But as you know, we just try to avoid catching falling knives. Most insider purchases are going to be at value plays. They're going to be insiders buying stocks they believe are undervalued, which does often mean they are buying and also selling, but buying a little early on average. And you want to avoid basically joining them in buying the stock early if you can. Try to avoid catching some falling knives here. And so that's why we'd want to wait for this to get above some of these moving averages here. Probably, I mean, even just the 20-day on this one, it seems to follow okay. And just waiting for it to at least get above there and show that it is going to stick above that 20-day is probably where I'd be interested in taking a stab, potentially adding this to the portfolio. So right now, I think it's a very high signal insider trade. Just going to want to wait for this price action to clean up a little bit before deciding to buy or not. Moving on to Option Care Health here. We have, what do we have here? A director buying the stock. Let's take a look again at the notes. So they're just telling you reflects weighted average price. So a very discrete normal purchase there, nothing to worry about. As we can see, it looks like he also bought back in August. Option Care Health stock has been dwindling a little bit over the last 6 months. Insider buying, generally speaking, hasn't been particularly good over the last 2 years at least. No real recent insider selling though is a positive sign there. If we take a look just at this guy's track record, it looks like, I mean, he apparently was the only one buying the stock recently. And it looks like we can just go look over here. Kind of a mixed bag here. It looks like this one's going to turn out pretty well. This purchase from back in the end of 2024, but the rest of them seem to not be working so well so far. So this one's going to turn out pretty well, but all the rest of them he's not doing particularly good at, which his overall returns actually look okay, which let's see if there's more down here maybe that he's benefiting from. So he's benefiting from a couple of these older purchases back in 2021 that did work out. So kind of a little bit of a mixed bag here. I'd lean probably slightly bullish on this one in terms of the insider returns. Just see if I have any specific notes on this one. So maybe lean slightly bullish on this one, but it's probably more in that like 3 out of 5 range. It's kind of a 50-50 win rate. Looks like his win rates or his returns are going to come down. Once more time passes and these start to have 3-month, 6-month, 1-year returns coming in, then I believe that they're going to drag down his overall returns and he's not going to look quite as good. But we can can still go take a look. Taking a look at the price action first, you can see well below the 200-day, but kind of flirting around with the 20 and the 50-day here. So for me, if I was even going to take a look at this, I'd want to wait for this to just stick above that 50-day for just a second, which it's actually trading just below both of them now, but it's flirting with it, right? So it looks like it bounced off of it, which it's done quite a few times, as you can see, just a handful of little bounces or little peaks above it, but hasn't, I mean, even all the way back here, but hasn't yet turned around for any significant period of time. So we'd like to see it get above those and stay above them for a second before even taking a look. If we go to the valuations here, we can see trading at a pretty low valuation as per usual. Insiders are buying dips here. So insiders are buying kind of value plays here. So overall, I think this one, to me, I'd want to look a little bit more into the story, maybe just to see what exactly is the argument, what the insiders are saying about why things might be heading in the right direction here. But just solely from what we've looked at, I think this is actually a pretty interesting insider purchase. Not quite as high of a signal of an insider buy as the last one that we just looked at, but, you know, trading at a low valuation. And we do also have, you know, it's a little closer to actually having the price action we'd like to see into being in an uptrend. But again, we'd want to wait for that to get over the 50-day and stay over it for a second. And now we've got a couple of stocks where we saw a ton of insider buying. One would be Utzbrand here, Utzbrand, which you can just see all over the place, Utzbrand, and then the other one being Matador Resources. So we'll take a look at both of those. We can look at the filing just to make sure, solely owned by Series U, price is the weighted price, so pretty normal insider purchase there. And then if we go see, we can see all of these insiders here, these are going to be the same insiders, so 5 different insiders here buying the stock, including a pretty sizable purchase down here by a director increasing their holdings by 25%. The story starts to fall apart a little bit when we look at the group buying before. So generally speaking, group buying is a positive, and you know, they did group buy back here. That went okay, I guess, in May for a second, though the stock price again is now below that. A little group buying here in February, March timeframe. Again, the stock is well down since then. And the only really good, the insider buying that actually went pretty well here was at the end of 2023, and that obviously performed well. But we do actually have a history of insider group buying, so these buys are the ones that went pretty well, up 30% in the following year. There was also back here in 2022, in March, they did a pretty good job, up 17%, even though the stock continued to fall in March of 2022, even though the stock continued to fall over the next 3 months. So kind of a mixed bag. Generally speaking, I think the group insider purchases, I know just historically group insider purchases tend to be a slightly better signal, though in this case, we actually have a history of them buying the stock before. And so because as a group and without very good return. So because of that probably knocks it down a little bit for me, down into that, again, that like 3 out of 5 range. But if we're going to go look at data here, we can see again, they got crushed on earnings. So pretty poor earnings, which caused the stock to fall 20% or so. And now obviously way below all of the moving averages. So again, you know, EPS estimates fell, it looks like. Again, this is going to be another case of just like, we're going to wait this one. We're going to wait this one out. We're not going to try to catch this falling knife. Who knows how much further down it can go. So more than happy to wait. And before we even take a deeper look, more than happy to just wait for some of these moving averages to come down and get closer to the stock price. However, they do have a semi-interesting story in that they're trying to expand to California right now. So there is some, which is hurting their margins a little bit, but that's a nice push for them. That could obviously lead to some growth, and then obviously trading at a pretty low valuation as well. So another value buy by an insider, but again, try to avoid catching those falling knives. Take another look at it once it gets above the 20 and or the 50-day moving average. Another pretty much exactly the same story here. Matador Resources with plenty of insider buying before, with pretty mixed results. Obviously, a ton of insider buying here that did not work out once tariffs came in and kind of crushed it. More insider buying here in May in tariff time, which obviously worked out pretty well. Some insider buying over here just a few months ago, 2 months ago or so, didn't work out very well. A little bit of insider buying here didn't work out very well. So just another similar story. Let's see if we can go back even further. 2023, there's insider buying here, which did actually work out quite well with the stock going up 50%. So in this case, we have pretty much a similar story of a group insider buying, which is notable. Stock is down quite a bit, also notable. But again, the track record of these insiders buying the stock has not been particularly great, though the stock price is now down to where they were in May of 2025. So maybe they're timing it correctly on this one. But Again, I'm gonna have to rate this one, you know what, a 3.5. Maybe it gets a slightly better rating than Utz brand just because the returns maybe are slightly better on previous purchases, but you know, not the highest signal insider selling. We go take a look next at, we're gonna obviously run into the same problem here where the stock is well below the moving averages, and again, at least wait for it to get above the 20-day here before even deciding to take a look. They did release a update, I thought. Yeah, provide strategic natural gas marketing update. Well, a marketing update is kind of funny for a natural gas company to release, but basically they have secured firm transportation on Energy Transfer's Hugh Brinson pipeline to move 500,000 whatever quantification is. I don't know the oil and gas industry very well, per day of natural gas production out of the Permian Basin to points of sale where demand and pricing have historically been significantly higher than the hub. The founder says, with takeaway constraints increasingly visible across the Permian Basin, locking in firm transportation out of the basin is an important part of the long-term planning. So I don't know, maybe something's going in the right direction there. They did also increase their dividend. They do also have share repurchases going back on. They did beat EPS and earnings estimates. However, there is just some more macroeconomic weakness in the prices they are getting for their oil and natural gas, which has caused the stock to not react super well. Not quite as cheap, or not nearly as cheap as Utz brand on historical valuation numbers, but certainly below their median there, their 5-year median. So again, probably another one just not even interested until it at least gets above the 20-day and can prove it can stay above that 20-day for more than like two or three trading days. So I would wait for that before I take a deeper look. But overall, I don't know the oil and gas industry super well. You know, some of that macroeconomic weakness there is definitely slightly concerning. So I don't really know between this and Utz. I mean, Utz has such a long way to go before it were to actually get back up to the moving average that by that point it might actually be it might be a more interesting play. They have a clearer story to me, at least in terms of that growth in California that could be interesting, and they're trading at a lower valuation. Though again, depending on what happens, whether or not the moving average comes down faster, the stock price goes up faster, it might not look nearly as cheap once it catches back up. So similar situation to both of these. Big group insider buying, not the highest signal group insider buying we're going to see. Stock's way down at low valuations. Stock price is way down. Need to wait for those to strengthen up a little bit before even taking a stab. AMRZ is one we already looked at yesterday, so we don't really need to look at again today, but we've got another insider, this time the CTO, buying a bunch of the stock, $51, pretty normal purchase there. I don't know what currency, because this is like a Swiss company or something, so I don't know what the currency, so it looks like the purchase was made at price of $41.51 per share, which I actually think this, even though it says dollar sign, I'm guessing this is actually going to be in the Swiss franc currency. That'd be my guess, but either way, a pretty normal buy. We saw the CEO buying yesterday, or a few days ago, we saw the CEO buying a pretty compelling insider purchase. It's a spin-off, trading at a relatively low valuation. Good story for why it's going to increase. The CEO has now bought quite a few times, and you can see the insider buying back here. Now we've got the CEO and CTO stepping in and buying the stock again at around the same prices. I think this is a pretty compelling long-term insider play. You've got the long-term insider. It's a spin-off. We should see some more analysts starting to cover the company, hopefully bring some more eyeballs to it, and then obviously now that they've spun off, they're able to focus on their core business and hopefully grow that. So that is a pretty compelling spin-off play there. Let's see, what else do we have here? No returns for that guy. More of the Utz brands guys there. Pridio, Avidia Bancorp, another one where we've seen tons and tons of insider buying. This one's just a recent IPO, so not quite as interesting, as we don't really have a track record for any of these guys, and we don't have a specific, not really a great story. It's just a new IPO, which is less compelling than the spinoff, where you actually do have a legitimate story for the spinoff itself. What else do we have? So MSC Industrial Direct here. We've got the 10% owner and a director here buying the stock. First purchase in quite a long time by anybody here, it looks like. The same person was buying the stock back in April of 2025 of this year, so obviously that stock is up quite a bit since then, about 13%. We look back a little further, the only two insider buys they've had, overall the timing of insiders looks pretty good. You can see selling up here, and then just some smaller selling at some of these peaks, but no selling down in the valley. So overall, I think the insiders here have typically timed their insiding pretty well, which kind of makes sense because this is a much more, we've got a trading company here sort of in that the industrial sector, which tends to be much more cyclical, which in theory theory, then the insiders would be able to time pretty well, because cyclical industry, you should know when you're at the bottom of the cycle. So not a ton of purchases from this guy. These are his first 2 purchases since 2022. If we look at his previous returns, though, he's kind of nailed it across the board. 12% 1 year, 10% 1 year, 36% 1 year. Obviously 12 and 10% not the greatest returns of all time, but they did come during a slightly tougher environment. And then so far right now was up 20% in 6 months, 20% in 3 months, still up 12%. So we've got about 100% hit rate on buys, averaging pretty good returns historically on those previous purchases. I don't know if there's any more down here. Nope. If we look at his sales, his sale return's not quite as good, but I mean, only negative 5%, meaning the stock went up 5% in the year after selling, definitely means he tends to sell. The stock underperforms, obviously, the S&P when he tends to sell. So overall, a pretty high signal insider purchase here, somewhere in that 4.5, maybe even a 5 out of 5 range from the insider buying in this case. Then we can go take a look at the price action itself. And in this case, he's actually not really buying a dip. I mean, buying a little bit of a short-term dip here, but only going down from like 90 to 80, was at 12, 13% or something over the last month. Not a very big dip buy, and certainly not what we saw at some of those other companies we looked at earlier. So we have it bouncing off. You also can see it clearly bouncing off the 200-day here, and now flirting with the 20-day EMA. It was slightly above it. I don't know. It looks like it's just barely below it right now. So we'll see if it does get up above that pretty handily. Then we are looking at a much more solid situation than what we are seeing at the previous companies, where the stock price was trading way below those moving averages. Obviously, if it then got above the 50-day, we'd really be cooking and really have a strong momentum heading in the right direction. But either way, already looks to be in quite a bit of a stronger situation, just from the momentum wise, I guess, than from a technical standpoint than what we saw before. In this case, not trading at a cheap valuation by any means. So not really a value play here, not really a dip buy, which is what would turn this into a little bit more of probably just fits into what we call a momentum play here, which is just that, we think the stock price is going to get above. The stock price had been, going in the upper direction. You can see the 200-day is still, going in the up direction, going up into the right. The 50-day is just starting to teeter out. So kind of just the whole play here is just, okay, if this gets above the 20-day and sticks above the 20-day, then I would make this a momentum play just based on a strong signal by the insider, a strong insider purchase signal from that director who only bought once before back here in April and worked pretty well and has good returns. They also did some other bullish things that would kind of hint towards, the stock heading in the right direction, as they did beat on EPS and revenue. They did raise their dividend. They also have just returned this last quarter. They returned to daily sales growth and EPS growth. They have had some margin compression due to tariffs and inflation, and then public sector sales being affected by the government shutdown. But then obviously the government shutdown will be a tailwind when and if that opens. And then tariffs and inflation that's always going to be a struggle. That's probably the main risk, is just whether or not that will cause some more margin compression. But they did mention that they have been now raising prices to try to meet, because they were having inflation on their inputs, and now they've been raising prices to kind of offset that and hopefully clean up the margins there a little bit. So overall, pretty good story here. Let's just see if this thing sits above the 20-day and can kind of confirm that it's gonna hanging out above the 20-day and that this isn't just a near term, just a little blip. And I think we will have a pretty strong setup there. Overall, I mean, we've seen tons of banks, again, as always, just all sorts of Glacier Bank, Citizen Financial Bank, People's Bank, First Boosie Bank, all sorts of different banks. Anything else? First Trust Mortgage, not really a bank, but kind of similar. Green County Bank. All these guys, a lot of these guys actually have pretty good returns too, which might be worth taking a look a little deeper into some of those. I'm kind of sick of looking at banks. We look at them so frequently, but I mean, they are the strongest industry right now, and that's for a reason. Insiders clearly think that now is a good time to buy the banks. So you can go to ceowatcher.com. It'll put you, if you sign up there, it'll put you on the email where you'll get the daily email with notes on all of this. You can also join the Discord if you want real-time notice, all that fun stuff. But head over to ceowatcher.com, look through all the buys, look through all the sells yourself. You can sort and filter by insider returns and all kinds of fun stuff. And don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you next time.